Before we jump into John's podcast, if you've ever felt like you should be reading more or thinking more deeply about the world, but didn't know where to start or who to do it with, we just launched something for you. It's an online book club and community with Dr. John Patrick. Starting this February, we'll go through important books together, guided by Dr. John, with live discussions and a thoughtful group of people who want to grow in wisdom, clarity, and critical thinking. It's free to join right now, but we may introduce paid access later. A benefit, if you do join now, you'll get exclusive early access to a live Q&A with Dr. Patrick. So if that sounds like something that you want to be a part of, don't wait. Just click the link in the description or show notes to join, and we'll see you inside.
You know who you can trust, and it's got nothing to do with education, has it? There are good people across the board. So goodness doesn't come from having a certain level of education. And it doesn't come from faith newly acquired, does it? The day you become converted, you do not become good, you become redeemed. And then the work starts. And the Brits had a saying, it takes 3 generations to make a gentleman and then 3 generations to lose it. We're seeing that around the world. I mean, the horrors that the royal family are going through, well, it's happened before. But now, the modern world, secrets can't be kept the way they used to be kept. Frightening. Standards are not the same. If you don't have any wisdom, you're not going to run any profession well. So we're seeing the problem in the law as well. My grandson lawyer, who says of the law that is a set of propositions, it's performance-related. You don't need any basis. Purely procedural. But of course, the important things in life are not purely procedural, are they? Marriage is not purely procedural. You don't get what marriage is about by saying that you can marry anyone you like, where you like, how you like, and they're all the same. They're not. That's the whole point. And consequences flow. I remember quite clearly one of the moments of recognition, I suppose, when I was about early 20s. And there was an annual lecture for the BBC Reith lecture. The current leadership of the BBC would be appalled at Lord Reith, but the BBC was a trusted source of news. No, it's not. It's now controlled by the narrative, which is not a good way to go. But this particular year, the lecture was given by the man who had invented the contraceptive pill. And I remember him rejoicing in the fact that he had been able to separate the joy of sex from the risk of pregnancy, and how much better the world was going to be. I think a good case can be made that in terms of human relationship, the contraceptive pill has done more damage than anything else I can think of. Because the fact that everybody knew that sex should and would, if you went on doing it, produce babies. And babies came to be looked upon as something you wouldn't want. Not a good idea at all. And who has the best marriages that last the longest? Those that are chaste before marriage and faithful afterwards. We're designed for that life, which it runs out of steam as time goes on. Everything does. You get slower and slower. You can see the distant horizon coming closer. And in my case, that doesn't bother me at all. I annoy my children and grandchildren every now and again by saying, if the good Lord sends me an exit ticket, I'm taking it. That's where I'm at the moment. Yeah, I mean, I'm perhaps pushing the point too hard, but it needs to be made, I think. It was guaranteed that once the pill came along, the first thing that would happen is that sexually transmitted disease would go through the roof. And, of course, it has. Now, it's huge. And, of course, that's not good news for anyone, is it? And of course, if you shack up as courtesy, which some girls say they feel obliged to take the pill, so that if they go on a date, a way of saying thank you is having sex, that is that's a destruction of society. Jesus says there's no necessity to divorce, but it can be done for sexual immorality. That's making a very clear point of how important it is that men and women were actually made to flourish best when they live together with all their warts and all, come to accept them and indeed cherish them in a way. That's the best life that's available to us. And at our stage, to sit back and have a steady flow of children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren passing through our home, and we having the good fortune of being relatively close to most of our children geographically. That's a satisfying life. Now, I've enjoyed over the years, the great privilege of being allowed to talk to mainly Christian doctors and medical students since the beginning in the 90s. And now I'm only doing the occasional trip. I did 3 weeks in Jamaica while the hurricane was there, which was actually very satisfactory for me. I wondered whether it was still my advanced stage, whether that was still on, I think so. I hope they'll tell me it's not when it's not. I need to be told when to stop. I mean, this podcast wanders around all over the place, and I said, that's fine. People don't have to watch it. We'll see what happens. And some of you graciously write to me with a touch of humor saying, I actually enjoy the rabbit holes because I'll follow you down an argument and then you'll leave it hanging and I'll stay there and ponder it for a while. And that's the best I can do. I mean, I think a teacher's job is not to pass on information. For goodness sake, if you just want information, you're much better off with a book because you can stop and think about the bits you don't understand and need to. The job of a teacher is to get under your skin and start you thinking about things you ought to have thought about and haven't, and moving you on in that way. But now we don't even think about what a learned person would be. But at the very least, if you're going to have some wisdom, you must have a book as a source. Now, if the source is the Quran, you get a Muslim society and currently in trouble because they made claims about the Quran which are clearly not true. Let's get this straight. If you were brought up, say, in rural Pakistan, you believed everything the Imam said was true. But the internet has changed that completely now. And they can't help but know that what the Quran says in many areas is not true. And it hasn't been perfectly preserved. I forget how many 100 different versions there are now. And there are more different readings in the Quran, which is a fraction of the size of the Bible, as there are in the Bible. But the Bible never had any problem about that. They said from the first, look, this is our human account of what we saw and remember about Jesus. Now, Paul and Peter didn't quite get on about those things. And all the way through, we've accepted that it's humans trying to come to terms with God. And Jesus didn't give you a whole list of things that you could take a multiple choice exam on and then call yourself a Christian. No, he told stories. He never wrote anything down on script. In the sand we know he wrote, but that's all we know he wrote. And the very fact that Peter and Paul were talking about issues in ways that had to be resolved over time means that there are multiple readings at different times as we see the evolution of thought, always starting from the stories and the miracles that came with the incarnation. And at this time of year, it's a good time to remember that and think about the whole story of the birth of Christ. And next week I will probably reread something I read many years ago, maybe on the podcast. I don't know where it is, but Elizabeth Googe's account of Mary being told what's going to happen to her. And it is a beautiful account. And so I will try and do that next week. But in the meantime, look around and think about how much of the things that you really enjoy are derived from the Judeo-Christian story. I mean, Christmas is not about things, is it really? So say so. I mean, the films that Americans used to watch, which actually captured something about the lawyer who wrote some pushback on racism in a southern town and was punished for it when racism was real and bad, pure prejudice. And now there's pure prejudice all the way around the world, but we don't have to accept it. And the prejudice, when it's there, has come from a failure to understand what they say they believe. And the correction is to do that. Luther King was a good example of that. So think about what questions you can say. I mean, when people say Merry Christmas, I say, not too merry though. Happy, yes. Don't get too drunk. Remember what the season is really about. And I go weekly to a men's group at my church, and I think increasingly, because you can see it amongst the young as well, there's a need for places where people can talk to one another in a way that they've forgotten how to do in many respects. But once a little nudge here and there, and it gets going. We have a bunch of guys meet every Saturday morning for talk and reading and sharing what we've learned, often starting from Scripture. And we all enjoy it deeply. That's why we come. Christian schools do something of the same. They have an ethos that makes it different. Now, sometimes evangelicals in particular are too enamored of the fact that once you're converted, everything's going to be fine. No, not at all. And many Christian schools end up taking students in, or all the other schools have said we can't handle them. And I've been there talking, and when you see a 15-year-old girl dressing as though she's a few years older than that and not doing well, you realize the willingness of naive Christians to say, oh, we can take anyone. No, you can't. Some ideas are not compatible. And you say, well, we would take you, but this and this has to change first. We are utterly foolish not to have realized that we are products of Judeo-Christian culture and celebrate that. I mean, our rulers who thought that bringing Somalis into America and then allowing them to live as a subgroup, they must be ignorant of a very high order. And here's another book for you, The Desert Sands by Thesiger. Thesiger was the first man, I think, to travel from Addis Ababa to the sea through Somaliland and do it successfully, and he had to take a bunch of soldiers with him because it was a violent tribal society. Desert societies, nomadic societies fight over water. They kill people over water. They become very good at that kind of behavior. That's how the Muslim religion spread, because it gave some structure to the lives of pagan nomads who lived by robbing caravans. And then they started taking land, and they took over became the biggest empire in the world in a few centuries, and then collapsed in a few more in terms of influence. But the Desert Sands gives you an account of Somali culture, and you would say, oh my goodness, that would be hard to handle. So what did we do? We allowed them to establish Somali culture in America. And I've seen two now who, when caught with gross abuse of privilege and scandalous behavior, and immediately say when caught, but I had to do it to support my community. loyalty to other Somalis is more important than whether or not what you're doing is going to kill thousands of Americans. There's no excuse for the people who are supposedly looking at immigration policies and asking the question, how many of these can we take? Nobody could take the whole crowd in and expect that nothing will change. Tolkien lived in Birmingham, in an area where now it's no go for white people. That's racism too. That's a few miles from where I went to school. One of the best schools in England. But that enclave, there are unexplained deaths and disappearances of girls in their thousands across the whole of Britain. We've got to speak honestly about these things. Now, assimilation is not working in America either, is it? Because those who founded America had no doubt as to what the principles of your Constitution would be. It would be based on the Bible. And even Ben Franklin, who wasn't a Christian, understood that that was good. At the beginning of the discussions in Pennsylvania, he famously said, when someone else suggested we start with prayer, and he said, that's a very good idea. If we don't pray together, we'll certainly swing together. He understood. Good friend of George Whitefield. Read about it if you're interested. But culture matters. And that needs to be thought about deeply. And culture takes generations, many generations. So you can look at the history of almost anything and find this generational effect. Experimental science is entirely a result of Judeo-Christian thought. One Muslim tried it and he was persecuted, didn't do it anymore. They had the wealth at that point, but the culture that had emerged, and it took time, hundreds of years. You don't become good when you become converted, you become under new management. Now, the good news is to see so many intellectuals who were dismissive of Christianity now being perfectly willing to say no, it's otherwise. I mean, Elon Musk, Tom Holland, Neil Ferguson, you could go on naming them, even Dawkins. They know now that they're beginning to recognize that God is real. You can't look at the amazing phenomenon of genetic activity within the cell, the message written in every cell in your body, a couple of meters of sentence in every cell. My goodness, God is good at origami. But the message itself and how it works, it's stunning. Wow factor plus. And now cosmology, the Webb telescope is doing the same thing, totally turning upside down the idea of chaos slowly emerging into order. Apparently not. The Return of the God Hypothesis, Stephen Meyer's book, the title is provocative, but absolutely true. Now, of course, the worst place, not the worst, but one of the worst places to be in the university if you want to get into trouble is the Department of Theology in many places. Wherever you go, if you're going into art of any form, you better do a lot of research about who's going to teach you. I don't want any of my grandchildren to go to the arts faculty. If you do, you should do it later when you've got a job, so that you do it not beholden to the people teaching you and able to say to them, look, what you're talking is nonsense. It's good to see the pushback from across the board from people like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, who've got good minds and they're not afraid to put them to work. And the Unheard at the moment has had some super stuff on it. Good books to read for Christmas. So enjoy. The Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you and give you peace.